If you're doing good, say good. If you're doing great, say great. You guys didn't say anything. You're not doing anything today, huh? Wonderful. Okay, very good. Wonderful, wonderful. Who used to say that? Come on, all you old people. Who used to say wonderful, wonderful? Yeah, Lawrence Welk. Okay, God, very good. Dad used to watch them all the time. Wonderful, wonderful. We're going to continue our series on marriage and family stuff today, and this is the book that this basic lessons, these two lessons, are dealt with. Again, I'm going to remind you that you might say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to be married for 5 years, or I'm widowed now, or whatever, and I'm no longer married." But you've got kids coming up, you've got yourself, and this. The other thing that is important about this is you notice it says, and this is going to continue to be a problem. I don't know. I just can't get this fixed. Is that it says preventative and relationship enhancement programs. So this is not something that you can only use in marriage. It's primarily helpful in marriages because marriage is where you have a lot of problems. Okay, so, but if you're in any kind of a relationship with anybody, I mean, your work, your school, whatever, these principles can help. If you're in a close relationship with a friend, sometimes that helps. So these principles are going to be important to us. As we enter this, there's a story told about a guy who went to the doctors for his annual physical, and as he got there, the doctor checked him all out and said, "You know what? You're in really bad shape. I don't think you're going to last very much longer." So, what's the matter? He says, "Well, just too much stress. Your heart's all whacked up. You're gonna die. You have one chance, and that's if you eliminate stress in your life. You got to go home, talk to your wife, ask her to take care of you. You can't be getting out and getting all this stuff. Ask her to, cook, and if you need something, get it. Don't get it for you." Boy, now we're really going down, aren't we? I'll tell you that up a little bit. He said, "So that's the only way you're going to survive." So I went home and saw his wife and said, "Dear, there's good news and the bad news. Good news is I can live, but the bad news is I've got to eliminate all stress from my life for 3 months, which means basically I can't do anything. And you got to take care of everything that I need. Food, if I need something, I just can't be getting up. Just total stress-free life. Do you have any questions?" And I said, "Well, I just have one." He said, "Well, what's that? Would you like your casket to be green or blue?" You people just do not respond. If I had somebody who was a comedian up here doing something, they'd be having a blast. But at any rate, that's the way it goes. But you can tell it to somebody else and they'd love it. But some of the books that are important, and if you guys want to go to the next slide, 2 books that I'm going to mention here are A Lasting Promise, which this is dealt with. A Lasting Promise is the one that this particular series is based on. And there's a new one of that, a revised edition that looks like this. Okay, so this is the old one. This is the new one. But you can order this online, Amazon, get how much it costs. But I recommend either one of those if you're somebody that's going through it. A lot of the principles you say, "Well, I didn't get everything in there. The communication technique or something else." It's all in here. Pick up the book and look at it. Another one that is on this slide is His Needs, Her Needs. Gave out hundreds of these to soldiers. If you want to talk about lives which get in stress, it's a soldier who's being deployed overseas. His family's over here, whether it's him or his wife. They're split up. The person's left here, which is the guy. He has all these, he's his kids, all the business, all the family stuff to take care of. It's the wife. She's got a lot of stuff going on. He's no longer taking care of the bills there, writing the checks, or whatever he happens to be doing and contributing to the household. So great book. 12 things that are problems in people's lives. 12 things we basically want, and 6 of them normally women want, and 6 of them usually men want, but there's not always the same. But it's a way in which to show how you can mesh those things and reduce some conflict in your life. If you go to the next slide, guys, there's 2 other books that I have there. Love and Respect, Love Languages. I don't have that. That's been borrowed from my set of books over here. If you'd like to borrow one of these, please let me know. Love and Respect, great book, talks about the 2 aspects of especially Ephesians 5. Love and respect from the husband and the wife and so forth, what we need most. And a great book, again, gave out hundreds of these to soldiers overseas to read, and they were very appreciative of them. Then the next slide we have here are some other books, and they're the financial books. Dave Ramsey, the most popular book around today, probably as far as Christian finances, and really everybody ought to read this. Doesn't matter whether you're married or not. I mean, it's really talks about how we can handle money. A lot of good principles in it. I agree with most of what he says, I think, but lots of great stuff to look at, okay, and pretty much right on. Yeah, Jim read it. I gave it to him. I pass out books every once in a while. Another book that I passed out, I don't think it's any longer in print. I got it on eBay. I bought 4 or 5 copies simply because I want to give it out, and maybe I'll have a testimonial of this some week because I gave this out to some guy in our church, told him if he would read it, promised to read it, I'd give it to him. I bought an extra copy, gave it to him, then I couldn't find mine. But I ordered more here. I've got about 4 or 5 copies. I had to buy them on eBay and stuff, like $3 or $4 or $5 a piece or whatever. But he said he practiced this principle. They got entirely out of debt for their car and their house, and they're working on their car now. This is a radical, radical approach. But I'll tell you, if you're in debt, if you're not handling your finances well, you need a radical approach in your life, or you're going to keep on going down the tubes. If you haven't paid a bill, there's a bill you haven't been able to pay in the last couple of months because you didn't have enough money, you need to read this book. Okay, just the way it is. So if you want to borrow them, I mean, you can look for it on eBay, but I got about 4 of them here. If you want to borrow one of those copies, I'll loan it to you. If you want to buy it, probably $5 to cover it or so, $5 or $6. If you don't have the money and you promise to read it, I'll give it to you. Now, that's not my copy. It's the dimes. It's the church's dime, okay? So that's fine. That's why we buy these, is to train and help people. So if you can help buy it, do it. But at any rate, reading some books is a great way to continue advancing your career, your life. And I'll tell you, if some of you guys that are young down here, been married for 15 years yet? Who knows? But, finances are so important. Get that while you're young. If you don't make the right principles and get that straightened out while you're young, you're going to wind up having trouble when you get married later on. Next slide. I'm going to continue this week going through the same thing we did last week. I'm going to get as far as I can through the rest of this book and some of the principles. Again, this is a 12-hour seminar, which I'm trying to get done in 2 35 or 40-minute segments. But I'll breeze on through this, and hopefully you'll find some principles. If you say, well, you notice there's no notes for you to write down. If you want to go back over it, by about 1 o'clock this afternoon, it'll probably be online, so you can watch both last week and this week. Take notes, look it over. If you have somebody else you want to take it, your spouse doesn't come, get them online, tell them to look at the thing, and then you'll be starting at some of the same principles or by that book I mentioned. There's 6 ground rules for handling conflict and differences. 6 ground rules you got to remember no matter what relationship you're in. Some of these were already mentioned before, so we're going to run through these 6, and let's just go on. First one is not really a ground rule. This is kind of an overview of protecting your relationship. There's some things in the scripture that talk about this. And part of it is anticipate problems. If you think your life is going to be terrific and conflict-free for the next 30 years, you've got another thing coming to you. Okay? So we got to anticipate these problems and try to realistically work out how to reduce conflict rather than being unrealistic and not expect conflict. Take responsibility for your behavior. And here's a verse for it. Romans chapter 12, verse 18, it says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. This is not talking about marriage. This is talking about the Christian life. So for us, we need to try to find the peaceful solutions as much as we can. That doesn't mean we can't stand up for our rights. We can't stand up for what we will think needs to be done. But try to be peaceful. You don't have to go get angry all of a sudden the first thing right off. Reinforce your partner's efforts to communicate well. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, therefore, encourage one another and build up each other, just as in fact you are doing. So our goal in marriage, our goal as a Christian is to build up one another, not try to find the faults and try to be critical and everything else. Try to build up each other as we go along in life. Now, there's 6 principles. The first one is called time out. And if you think I'm perfect or my wife's perfect, you got another thing coming. This last week, probably could have used a couple of these principles that we didn't use properly, okay? So look at these. The timeout principle is so good. When conflict is escalating, okay, we talked about one of the problems is when things are escalating, how do you stop it? When problems are escalating, call a timeout or a stop action. You can use any word you want. Sometimes they recommend you get some strange word that you say, that you think of, so you can use it in public, banana, or, something you don't normally use in conversation, so you can say, when that word said, time out. You stop everything. Nobody's going to say anything more. Nobody's going to argue. You're going to take a time out. You're going to wait. You talk about it later, okay? And then you're going to go back to using the speaker listening technique. Timeout is not, we're never going to talk about it. Timeout means we're not going to talk about it now. We're going to come back in a half hour, maybe 3 hours. Maybe we're going to come back tomorrow. We're not going to be angry about it. We're going to come back tomorrow because we don't want to let your wrath go down and the sun go down in your anger. But we are going to speak about it. It's not a, timeout does not mean we don't ever speak about it. It means we're going to not talk about it right now. We're going to let our emotions settle down. It's a great one if you have anger management problems. You know, you get angry, that's, you know, count to 10 before you say something is one of the things. Pause, this is a pause. Second principle, speaker-listener technique. We talked about that. I'm not going to go through that whole lot. If you don't know what it is, go into last week's sermon or buy the book. But it's a way in which one person says what they're going to say, just one or two sentences, the other person repeats back, paraphrases it back, and then the first person gets to say, yes, that's exactly what I meant, or no, that's not what I meant. This is how I said it. And they get to rephrase it till understanding takes place. Then they switch it to the next person, and the other person has the floor to say what they want to respond to in that way. So it's a very good technique. It slows down things to the point where people actually communicate. Here's another one of the slides that has a, if you go to the next slide, there's a comic here. It says, and do you promise to use the speaker-listener technique in your marriage? You know, if you do promise it, you probably have a little bit better time. I can tell you there's many times when we have used it, a number of times we've used it, many times we probably should have used it and didn't use it. But it really helps with communication, and not only in marriage. Next slide. The third thing is problem discussion and solution. When working on a problem, we will completely separate problem discussion from problem solution. Okay, Proverbs 18:13 says, he who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame. So you don't want to answer before you listen. So problem discussion is different than from problem solution. Discussing what the problem is one thing, but finding a solution is an entirely different thing. Don't mix up the two. It brings conflict into your discussion. 4, not a good time. We can bring up issues at any time, but the listener can say, this is not a good time. This is different from a timeout. Timeout is like, you know, escalating, stop, timeout, just done. Nothing else is said. But this is part of a discussion, not a good time. Can we find another time? If the listener does not want to talk at that time, he takes responsibility for setting up a time to talk in the near future. You know, I just got too much going on today. Can we do it tomorrow? You know, it's probably not a good time to talk when the husband, and it could be the wife, is watching a TV show, and it's the last 8 minutes of the TV show with the conclusion, right? That's probably not the time to say something. Now, wait till the next commercial, the next TV show. Can we talk about this in 10 minutes? Now, that's a bad thing to do because it means that the TV is more important than the person, you know, but if you see a person watching TV, it's the last 8 minutes, say, okay, when can I do this better? Or if the person's in the middle of just had a discussion with their boss on the phone, they're trying to work on a project that needs to be done in, you know, 1 hour, that's probably not the best time to have a conversation. Say, can we talk about this later and find another time to discuss it? This is before things are escalating. Next comic for you here. She's standing there with a flashlight in the guy's eye while he's sleeping. Is this a good time to talk? Probably not. Fifth thing, weekly couple meetings. And many people have weekly dates. That's the time you can, that's an important time. Sometimes you don't want to discuss things at a weekly date. You know, you want to go out to a restaurant, you want to have a meal, you want to go out and do something together, you want to take a walk in the park. That may not be the best time to talk about something, but it may. But you need to have that weekly time. If you don't, it'll happen like our lives happens oftentimes. You go through week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you're just trying to put things together, and you just don't have time to talk. If you don't talk, you don't communicate, you're not going to learn from each other. I mean, Lois's brother in Vermont's having problems, you know, and he's not doing well. Gwen's not doing well. We're going on a trip over there. We Care Too has its own issues. I'm dealing with the church. I'm trying to get a directory out before we leave. I mean, all this stuff going on this week and next week are a big, stressful time for us, you know? When those times come, sometimes it's tough. But if you do that consistently week after week after week and never talk to each other, you never get a chance to share stuff. Okay, so I'm not talking from a case of I do it perfectly, listen to me. I'm talking from a case of, you know, I do it imperfectly. Please, you know, let's all try to do it better. Last, fun, friendship, sensuality, and shared spiritual life. These are all things that you have to make time for. You make sure that you don't let anything these go out of your relationship. And one of these things is super important. I'll come back to that later. You might think it's spirituality, and it's not. I think spirituality is important. But I think you need to protect your time from conflict, and you need to deal with issues, and you need to have time for these. A weekly meeting encourages friendship or fun or whatever. So you have to have time to have physical relationships. You know, don't just let things that are important in your relationship get blown off because you don't have enough time. The next part, the next section of this is called expectations. And that's so, we talked a lot about this in the military because there's always problems and difficulties. We normally talked about it, and I did numerous of these, what we call reintegration briefings. You got soldiers leaving and going home. They haven't seen their family for a year, most of them. The family has not seen them. And you can't walk right in and expect to jump right back in and everything be exactly the same as when you left. You're a different person, the soldier is, and the spouse is, and the family is. And and that's why we have so many military families that are breaking up because they just can't handle this stuff. But chaplains are doing our best to try to promote this and help to influence people, you know? He comes home and expects everything's going to... Now, you got to consider, there's two things he hasn't had if he's done what he's supposed to be doing overseas for a year. One is sex, and one is alcohol. Neither for the whole time they were over there. So what do you think they're going to do when they come home? They would do both of those, so they tend to overindulge in hey, wife, I'm back, you know? And she hasn't seen it for a year, and she not be ready for that. I mean, I'm not going to get in that whole brief. I'm just saying there's a lot of things to come, and a soldier's expectations and a wife's expectations or a husband's expectations who's been home are much different. And he gets home, and he wants to just kind of, enjoy being home for a while. He gets home, and she's waiting to say, you got the kids, I'm off with my girlfriends for 2 days, A lot of different. And in the families without that kind of stress, we still wind up with expectations. So next slide, there's a couple definitions we need to look at. Expectations are beliefs about the way things will be or should be, including about behaviors, roles, life and death, relationships, and so forth. Who does what in the family? Who's going to do the laundry, Is the husband who's working all day and the wife is staying home, is he supposed to participate and do his own laundry? Is she going to do it? If she gets a job and they're both working all day long, is he going to do the laundry when he gets home? Who's going to cook the meals, There's a lot of roles that we got to figure out here, and there's expectations associated with those. Another thing is expectations that are not met lead to feelings of sadness, disappointment, frustration, and anger. And so we need to discuss expectations. This is why it's important. Every person, for you that aren't married, get premarital counseling before you get married. Okay? I require 6 sessions. A lot of guys that I do know 6 sessions. Today we're doing videos and stuff. When I was doing it, we read a lot of books. We did books. Budgeting and finance was one of the sessions I did. Get premarital counseling. Doesn't mean everything will be perfect, but it'll set you up for a better relationship than if you go in thinking everything's going to be perfect and then hit the snag, okay? One of the things we talk about with soldiers when they came home, and it didn't have it in this slides, but I added it here, is fantasies versus expectations. His fantasy is I'm going to go home and get a pizza. I haven't had a pizza for a long while maybe. I'm going to have a pizza. I'm going to go to sleep with my wife. Kids are going to love me. They're going to look for me and everything else. And you see these, and you love seeing these videos, right, on the TV every once in a while where the guy comes home and everybody jumps in his arms, and that's great. But what happens when they go home could be an entirely different story, I will tell you. And he has this fantasy. She has this fantasy. Oh, he's coming home, and now I finally can give the bills back to him. I can give the checkbook back to him. I don't have to mow the lawn anymore. I don't have to fix anything in the house. And he gets the kids for a couple of days, and I'm going to just kind of relax. Those are both fantasies that are probably not going to happen. We need realistic expectations. And when you go into family relationships, if you go into a relationship, you need to have realistic expectations. The next slide says, it's the guy and the woman sitting there. He's sitting there, his expectations, family night, this is nice. He puts his arm around her watching TV, and she says, oh, TV again tonight? What are the expectations for your date night, Could be told, you need to talk about this kind of thing, figure out what it's going to be. The power of disappointment. Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes a heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is the tree of life. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is the tree of life. We can't delay things. We need to work on them now. Don't say, oh, I'm going to wait. Now, how many times has this happened? People come to me for counseling after everything's blown up and it's really bad. Anticipate stuff. Work on it now, because if it gets delayed, it's a lot harder to fix. But if you get the desires fulfilled early in your marriage, you'd have a lot less problems, a lot less sooner. Expectations. Next slide. You have a couple different sets of expectations. You have aware, reasonable, or spoken that are in the clear. You know those. But then you also have these other expectations that are unaware, they're unreasonable, and unspoken. They're in the fog, and you don't know those. you need to be able to get those clear, get the ones that are in the fog, the unknown ones, and get them to the known ones so you can wind up talking about them and know what's going to go on and how that's going to work out. Next slide, if you would. This is one of my mantras, okay? If you're going to write anything down, write this down and brazen this in your head. Lower expectations raise performance. This can solve a multitude of sins, even in your work. Lower expectations raise performance. You know, you're going in, and again, work for me in the military. You know, I got a general, full board colonel answering to a general. You know, and I have to lower my expectations of what support I can get him. I've got to raise my performance. You know, and you go home, you got to with your wife or with another person you have a relationship. You know, lower your expectations. Don't plan that every night you're going to get home. Dinner's going to be ready exactly at 5 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, you can get to watch the evening news. At 7 o'clock, you're going to be able to, take those expectations and say, I'm going to raise my performance. Maybe I'll help the wife tonight. Or for the wife, maybe I'll handle the bills this week. Whatever that happens to be, you know. Lower expectations will raise performance. If you raise your expectations, they're not going to be met. If you lower your performance, you're not going to meet the other person's expectations. Put this in a plaque someplace and hang it for all of life. The next thing I want to talk about is issues and events. And a lot of times we concentrate on, we think the problem is a special issue at an event. It's, you know, he went to the baseball game tonight without me. Or, you know, she didn't get the laundry done. And it's an event-driven, but it's not an event-driven thing a lot of times. There's other stuff we need to look at. When you make a difference between issues and events. Next slide. Some of the issues that come up, as you see here on the left, for over time, it's money, communication, children, sex, in-laws, time together. All this stuff is stuff that comes up in a marriage relationship. Some things are bigger, some things are smaller. Oftentimes, communication and money and children are some of the biggest things. But we have to realize that these things have to be dealt with, and oftentimes we only deal with these in event situations, such as, I can't pay the electric bill. Now we're going to talk about money, you know, rather than looking at the whole financial issue and say, how are we going to handle money? Or, you never talked to me, and now I'm going to blow up, I'm going to bring up everything that's happened over the last 3 years. That's not a good thing to do, you know. Let's look at communication and work on it now, just because this one event didn't create the problem. You never told me about this. Children, Pastor Ed's going to handle that next week when he preaches and talk about children. He's raised 2, so he has all the answers. You need to listen to him. Next slide. The sad truth is most couples only deal with issues in the context of events. Okay? Happens the same thing at work. So if you think, I'm not married or whatever, there's other context. We only deal with conflicts in the context of events. You know, somebody forgets to pay me at work. Somebody criticized my work. My wife did whatever. Her husband did so. We only deal with stuff in the context of events, and that's wrong. There's 3 different levels. We have, if you look at the next slide, we have events, we have issues, and then we have hidden issues. There are 3 levels. The event is the top thing. And when I went onto a stress conference, Lois and I both, when we first got here, because we had a lot of stress at that point too, I'm going to tell you. That was maybe before Joshua was born. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of things going on from our last church and from here and our family. And Jonathan, even at that point, we had some bills that I'm not going to go into. Events, issues, and hidden issues. The thing they said, the problem is not the problem. That's the thing that I remember from that conference. The problem is not the problem. We look at the event and think the event is the problem, but it's not. The issue below it is the problem, and it may not even be the issue. It might be the hidden issues below that are the problem. So we got to drill down to those things and find what those are. The next slide kind of opens that up. It shows issues versus hidden issues. On the top of it, and you can't read everything it says there, it says caution, landmines, and other things. But if amongst the issues there on the next level, and I'm going to have to look up here a little bit to get this, you have religion, jealousy, money, careers, sex, children. All these things are issues that come up in a family, okay? But underneath it are also hidden issues. Down the bottom we have caring, control, acceptance, integrity, recognition, commitment. You know, how many people have said, you know, had a spouse or someone else say, oh, you did something so you don't care about me. Ever heard that? Maybe I'm the only one, okay? But what do you say? Where's that coming from? Well, that's a hidden issue. What is making the other person think you're not caring about them? Well, it's an event that took place, so, you can change the event. Or maybe it's because you didn't spend enough time, giving a person enough money, or you didn't handle the children properly. That's the issue. But the hidden issue around it is the person doesn't feel like you're caring about them. So you have to understand there's deeper issues that we need to deal with. And this slide is a very good slide. I'm pretty sure it's in the book also, but it's important to remember these different things. Hidden issues, the next couple slides mention these hidden issues can be control and power. Who's in charge? Do you feel controlled by somebody else? Caring. Do you feel loved and cared for? Recognition. Do you feel valued by your partner for who you are and what you do? And again, remember that these things can be event-driven. The person may respond they don't feel cared about, or they feel like they're being controlled by somebody. It may be true. It may not be true. It may be long-term, and it may be a hidden issue you need to deal with, or it may be something that is just surfacey. Guys, you can go through that slide if you would, please. And the next one has a couple more hidden issues in it, and it deals with the other ones we talked about here. Commitment, integrity, acceptance. Commitment, is your relationship secure? Are you going to stay with me? They're not sure. Hey, is this going to be something we're going to break up over? So many people just throw in the towel today, divorce. Integrity, when you feel challenged in how you, that's when you feel challenged in how you see yourself. Acceptance, desire for acceptance and fear of rejection. I want to know that I'm worth something, that what I'm doing is good. I'm valued. Signs of hidden issues, the below issues coming up into these kind of hidden, into other issues. Signs of them, next slide, is spinning your wheels, avoidance, trivial triggers, scorekeeping. Okay, what are those? Well, spinning your wheels, not getting any place, not making any advances. Avoidance, I'm just going to avoid you. Shut down. This is the thing we talked about when you get into anger issues. Just don't say anything. I'm going to leave, or I'm not going to talk. Trivial triggers, everything's going fine, and all of a sudden one little small thing happens, and boom, the place blows up. You think, what in the world just happened? Well, the person's had, all this stuff building up, and one little thing happened. You come home 5 minutes late you say, I'm going to be home in 5 minutes. You come home in 10 minutes. And boy, it becomes the massive thing that was beyond all beyonds. Well, it's because other things, hidden issues, haven't been dealt with before. So there's other stuff under there. It's not the fact that you're 10 minutes late or 5 minutes late. It's the fact that something else was under there. Whether it's at work, again, whether work or home or whatever. These are the trivial triggers. Scorekeeping, This is the 8th time you've been late. This is the 8th time that, the dishes didn't get done, or the dishwasher didn't get done, whatever it happens to be, okay? Scorekeeping. How many times has this happened in the past? And spouses, whether it's a husband or wife, can often remember way back, And then you feel like you can't get out of that rut because they just keep it up. And one of the things we're going to talk about if we get to it in the next 10, 12 minutes is going to be forgiveness. But next, handling issues and events. Events are often best handled by observing the ground rules, especially the timeout rule. Things are going to blow up, timeout. Let's talk about it when we have more sane discussion about it. Issues can be kept smaller and less negatively charged by regularly dealing with the problems that come your way. Your weekly couples meetings, okay? Something comes up, don't just let it go and say, I'll bring it up sometime to time. And the 8th time it happens, obviously you blow it up and, yell and scream and everything else, When it happens the first time, mention it. That made me feel this way. Or I'd appreciate it if you would say it. Don't let it build up. And then thirdly, hidden issues often respond best to open, safe, and clear communication. Find the best time to talk about it. Things are good, things are calm, and this is the person who's neither one under stress as far as time parameters or whatever. Hidden issues and Jesus Christ. The more you are solidly grounded in understanding the love and acceptance of Christ for you, the less reactive you are to these kind of issues. For instance, Galatians 5:22 and 23. Perhaps you all had to memorize it at some point, hopefully. But the fruit of the Spirit is love. Say it with me if you know it. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no rule. Been a while. You get different translations. They all put different ways and you miss up words. But that's a good thing to keep in mind. The fruit of the Spirit. Deal with the hidden issues in that direction. The next thing I'm going to talk about is commitment. 2 phases of commitment. Constraint commitment and personal dedication. Constraint commitment is making sure that you put constraints in your relationship that are not going to take it out of bounds. There's so many people in affairs. People just live together today. I mean, the commitment between a couple has gotten less and less oftentimes. And it's why we're in problems with a lot of people, a lot of times. And so we want to discuss these two. Next slide. The two faces are constraint commitment and then also personal dedication. Constraint is when you can't do something. Personal dedication is when you're committed to something and you do it yourself. Jesus said, Matthew 19:3-6, some Pharisees came to test him. Next slide, guys. And they answered, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Haven't you read, Jesus replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. We need to be committed to the relationship we're in right now. You know, if you've been divorced in the past, that's in the past. You can't go change that. But the relationship we're in now, you've got to be committed to this. You've got to follow this stuff through. And if you keep on doing the same things you've done before, you might get the same results you got before. And so look at these things. Commitment in Jesus' teaching. I'm committed to this relationship. We will not divorce. We will not do what's wrong because I'm committed to Jesus Christ. And then there's also personal dedication. Commitment in Jesus' teaching is this way. It says in this passage here, united it says in the NIV, it says cleave to one another. It's a glue. Marriage is about unity and oneness and stability. Next slide, guys. In Jesus' teaching, we see elements of constraint and dedication. As constraint has to do with the stability of the bond, and dedication has to do with the depth of the bonds in oneness. So constraint is, I will not divorce. Dedication is, I'm committed to you. Okay, if we can say there's two different things. Constraints, I'll just give you a little bit more of a difference between here. Constraints are social pressure, financial pressures, children, termination processes, procedures, moral factors. These are constraints, if you can read them all. These are constraints on a marriage relationship that help it stay together, hopefully. Dedicated couples, on the other hand, if you look at the next slide, it kind of shows us a picture. There's me, there's you, and then there's us. It's not that we're going to look at the constraints of other places, other people and so forth to put constraints on us, but we identify ourselves as a couple. There's a greater sense of a relationship agenda. Dedicated couples show, for instance, in the next slide, greater priority for the relationship. They place greater place given to their marriage and their mate than others. There's more satisfaction with sacrifice and understanding to give deeply toward this relationship. And then there's also less alternative monitoring, a protection of boundaries of marriage, not looking at other alternatives. The next slide is kind of funny. It's theirs. She's looking at this guy and she says to her husband, "I know the grass isn't greener, honey, but I'm just looking for some weeds." You know, we need to watch that. Next slide. It says dedication in 1 Corinthians 13:4-8 says, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it's not proud. It's not rude, it's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered. Doesn't all that flip off the handle at somebody. It keeps no record of wrongs, scorekeeping. All this stuff is, you think the thing I'm talking about, oh, that's just philosophy. No, it's sourced in the scriptures, okay? It doesn't keep a record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails." A couple more slides on the subject, and then we'll move on to the next one. Commitment. Constraint helps make a marriage stable. Dedication helps make a marriage fulfilling. So commitment means, there's other things we're not going to get divorced, but dedication is we're going to make this, we're not just going to live together and stay together, we're going to make it work and it's going to be fulfilling for us. Dedication is also about choices. Do you view it as losing something or as gaining a deeper, enriched life? You know? Some guys say, "Why should I get married? Because I can play the field." Well, that's their philosophy, but it's not the best one. Is it your choice? It's your choice. The long-term view says this. It helps you through the up and downs. In other words, saying we're committed, we're dedicated to each other, we're not going to change. Next slide, guys. The long-term view says it helps you through the ups and downs and makes life worth investing in this. It does not threaten the long view when you get mad. We're not going to stop or terminate this thing because I'm mad at you or something went wrong. And the long view must be nurtured. This is not just a short view thing. This is a long haul. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon for a long time. Okay? Demonstrating constraint. There's a couple verses that we want to bring out here. Job 31:1, he says, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. That's the constraint for it. Dedication is constraint. Genesis 3:6, when a woman saw that the fruit was good on the tree, was good for food, pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. That's lack of constraint. She was told, don't eat it. She saw it was good. The constraint went out the window. She ate of the fruit, and we are here today in a sinful nature because of it. And her husband followed along. So it's not just Eve, it's her husband participating in that. So we need to decide we're going to stay within certain constraints, which will help it. Regaining dedication in our lives, that was the constraint part, the dedication part. If you've lost your love, if you think things are going bad, things are being tough, here's a way of regaining dedication in the next slide. Revelation 2:4-5. But I have this against you, that you have left your first love. This is John writing to one of the churches. Remember, therefore, from where you have fallen, and repent and do the deeds you did at first. This passage is first and foremost about a dedication to the Lord. We need to recognize that even when things get bad, even when we stray a little bit, God wants us to come back. We can be rededicated. This church had lost its first love. It can gain it back. We've lost our first love in a relationship. It can be gained back. Love conquers a multitude of sins. The wisdom of Jesus' words to the church of Ephesus, which is what that first statement is, can be brought down into 3 words. Remember what it was like. Repent of what was wrong. And do the same things you did at the beginning when you loved God. And we're taught a lot of different counseling techniques in the Army, but one of the techniques was this, go back to the last place when you really had a good relationship. What were you doing then? Do the same things again. Repeat the stuff you did at the beginning. And that's what he's saying here. Remember your first love. Go back and do what was right at the beginning. Forgiveness. One of the toughest things. If you can't forgive, you're going to hold it inside. If you hold it inside, what's going to happen? Yeah. It's going to be bitterness. Not going to get past it. You need to get rid of it. You need to be able to forgive. Now, forgive doesn't always mean forget, although it should. In God's mind, I think it's forgotten. It's put it in the past. We can't always forget, but we can forgive, and we need to work on that. The biblical word forgiveness. Let me go to the next slide to show you. Matthew 6:12, and this is, again, good for all of us. Doesn't matter if you're married or not. Forgiveness. Matthew 6:12, forgive us our debts as we also forgive our debtors. In a lot of churches, they repeat this almost every week, right? The Lord's Prayer. We can all say it in our sleep, okay? Forgive us our debts as what? So if you don't forgive someone else their debts, if you don't forgive their trespasses, what is the possible repercussions? God doesn't forgive you. Now we know that the scripture says he forgives us of all our sins if we accept him as our personal Savior. But there's a difference of forgiveness and paying the penalty for what we're doing. And Jesus Christ here links the two. You don't forgive others, why should I forgive you? We need to consider that. The Greek word aphiemi, which means to send away or to give up, to no longer, to keep no longer, or to let go. That's the Greek word that he's using there. Means let it go, don't bring it up any longer. And that's hard, because in scorekeeping, what do? We bring up the last 5 times you did it, or maybe the last 30 times you did it. It depends on how good our memories are, and we often do that. Definitions: a canceled debt is a picture of forgiveness. It's done. It's gone. If you had a canceled debt, the bank, they're not going to come after a mortgage for again. They're not going to come back. It's done. It's gone. You have a note of satisfaction. A canceled debt is a picture of forgiveness. We need to keep that in mind. The next one's a slide, is one of the comics again. It says, you say that you forgive me. Now, I don't know if you get to see this here. On the left file, there's a whole filing cabinet he's leaning on. It says mistakes, peeves, and gripes. And she says, you say you forgive me, but I can't help a feeling you're still holding a grudge with this free filing cabinet full of all the mistakes and problems. That's the way we are sometimes with forgiveness. There's an insurance company. I hate their advertisements on TV. But I love one. I'm not going to show it to you right now. Maybe you can feel this. If you don't, I might get in trouble. Go ahead, guys. We can put that on. 10 seconds. Listen closely. Go ahead, guys.
Liberty Mutual accident forgiveness means they won't hike your rates over one mistake. See? Liberty Mutual doesn't hold grudges for drivers with...
I love that one. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But hold grudges. How many times do we hold grudges and it gets us into mistakes, gets us into problems, we can't get over something? Definitions: forgiving is not forgetting. I said this earlier. Grieving is different than not forgiving. Okay, grieving over something you lost, maybe a passion or caring or some relationship that you need to rebuild, trust. Forgiving does not mean that the person committed an offense is not responsible for their behavior. Okay, they're still responsible for what they did, but you can still forgive them. And they need to take responsibility for it, but them taking responsibility for the behavior should not impact whether you forgive them or not. Okay? How many times did Jesus Christ say that Peter should forgive? 70 times 7. He thought he was doing well. 7, 7 is the perfect number. He said 70 times 7. In other words, an infinite amount of times. If you don't want to go infinity, you can take 70 times 7, which equals, I think, 490, right? That's a lot of times to forgive. May not be infinity, but I doubt there's any of us that are forgiven the same exact offense 490 times. We're way off. All relationships and forgiveness need forgiveness. And Mark 11:25 says, "And when you stand praying, forgive if you hold anything against anyone, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you your sins." This is a tough one for a pastor, Don't give any of your offerings if you have a problem with somebody else. Go fix that first. I don't know how much. I hope if I said that, we wouldn't lose a lot of offerings in the church. How many of you are holding grudges and problems with other people so that you shouldn't give your giving to the church? Hopefully I could say that, and the amount in the offering plate wouldn't change a single bit. No, they come with all the. Don't you remember the 12 things where they all put their coins in the widow's mite? They all brought that into the temple. So, yep. So anyway, one path to working it through. Here we go. Next slide. Set an agenda of how you want to work this through. Pray. Explore the pain and concerns. Yourself, maybe write it down. Sometimes that helps. Or with the other person. Ask forgiveness. Agree to forgive. Then see if you can, and the other person can change the patterns that offend. Pray some more and move forward. Okay? Again, this is one that you're just going to have to look at the video because you're not going to have time to write all 8 of those things down or buy the book. But set an agenda. In other words, this is what we're going to discuss today. It's not going to be the whole world. We're going to discuss this one thing. Discuss that one thing, fix it. Let's discuss the one thing, pray, explore the pain and concerns, ask for forgiveness, agree to forgive, change patterns of offend, pray, and move forward. We're at the end of our time today. I'm going to ask you guys, before you close off everything, I want you to go to the one that says fun is important. Can we do that? It's about 5 slides in the future. Fun is important. After doing 12 hours of this stuff, this slide I think is the most important slide. This and a couple more that are coming up are the most important slide of ever. Fun is important. People don't get married to have conflicts and solve problems. You have to handle these things well, but that is not what attracted you to this other person. Fun is surprisingly important in marital health. Too many couples do not keep fun alive in their marriages. Next slide. We're going to skip this. It shows how long since you dated your partner or did something fun. Next. Keeping fun alive. Make the time. Protect the time from conflict. No issues or problem solving during your time together. Get going. Break out of the ruts. The next slide shows they're looking at the calendar, and it says, I think we're in a rut. He is hang gliding on 15 times in the month. That's the one thing. I mean, a little bit of variety, and that's obviously what he loves to do, not necessarily, and maybe they both love it, but they're in a rut. Get going, next one. Here's one way. Make a personal fun deck of things you'd like to do. Like a deck of cards, just write things on them that you want to do. Pick 3 items from each of your decks that each of you have written separately. Each one picks one thing from the other person's deck, and then make the choices happen. Okay? You ready? This next slide, most important thing, is the last slide I'm going to show in this series. You have to read the book if you want anything else. But this is so, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. Nobody ever got a divorce who was having fun. I mean, I can't prove it statistically, but they do it statistically. I mean, think about it. Nobody ever got a divorce who was having fun. We always wind up, the divorces wind up because we're not having fun. We're doing too much. But if you're having fun, you're not going to get a divorce. And I will tell you that I and Lois are some of the biggest offenders in this thing. Our lives are so busy and crazy with all kinds of other stuff. We don't take enough time for fun. Really. And we need to. And this is for you guys too. If we can have enough fun in our lives, all of a sudden, a lot of these other problems we're talking about, the disagreements, the forgiveness, the problems, the issues, a lot of that stuff goes away if we would just have fun together. That doesn't mean me going out and having fun, golfing or, fishing while she has fun going out with the girls and having lunch or something. It means fun together. Let that slide along with the other one. Raise performance, lower expectations, be burned in your mind to help you in any relationship, but especially your marriage. Guys, come on back up for a final song. Dear Lord, we just thank you for the fact that there is help for us in our marriages. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be talking about children's role, about children, raising children, discipline of children. We'll talk about the wife's role in the family. We'll talk, Pastor Scott come back, and he'll be talking about some stuff for us about marriage. We just ask for your blessing over each of us in our relationships, in multiple relationships, in our jobs and every place else, but especially in our families, because Satan would love to destroy families and churches. We pray that you might help us to keep your focus in our minds. We might look at the scriptures for our guidance in everyday life. In Jesus' name, amen.